Hello everybody, I'm Gwen Campbell-Mindes. Welcome to Gwen's Bookish Ramblings, and we're doing something that's a bit of a break from the stuff that I've been doing of late, and that is Donald J. Sobol's Encyclopedia Brown Solves Them All. Encyclopedia Brown was not just this one book. There were a whole series of them, but this is one that I think I may have even owned at one point in my life, and so it sticks out particularly well in my memory. And what you have in these books, they're very, very Sherlock Holmes-inspired in terms of how Encyclopedia Brown goes about solving cases. Now, the story of these books, the basis of them, is that you have this boy whose proper name is Leroy Brown, but everybody calls him Encyclopedia because he is one of those people who seems to know everything. And Sherlock Holmes-like, he solves mysteries by, looking at a situation and seeing that, this thing couldn't have happened if the person had done that he finds clues in places that one wouldn't expect. Or at least, potentially if you're just a child reading these books, I don't know. I'm very bad at, solving mysteries. I read mystery books because I want to see the story as it unfolds. I don't really care about beating the detective in the book to the punch. Anyways, so what you have in this book is you have a bunch of little mysteries. Each one is basically a chapter in length. And then what happens is at the end of the chapter, it leaves you on a cliffhanger as Encyclopedia Brown, or in a couple of cases, somebody else says, well, no, the real killer, the real culprit is, and at the bottom of the page, it then says, turn to page X at the end of the book to find out what actually happened. Basically, it's providing an opportunity for the person reading the book to try to figure it out on their own before they actually, look up and find out if they were right, if they figured it out the same way that Encyclopedia Brown did, and so on. So this is a book from 1965, and personally I think it still stands up today, though granted, things would be different in this day and age of cell phones, but let's go back in time to 65, and we'll look at a few of these. So this first one, because the book is for kids, and because it's for kids, most of these have illustrations in them, and in this case, we're looking at a supposed judo competition. And the guy who's attacking the other standing kid, his name is Bugs Meany, and he's kind of an antagonist to Encyclopedia Brown because he's basically a no-goodnik. And, in most of these stories, when he shows up, he's the local bully. He's usually, messing around, trying to do things. And the thing is, he is that standard kids book bully antagonist that is, in the case of these books, he's doing bad stuff, but he's not like a serious criminal. Encyclopedia Brown, who is apparently smart enough that his own father will take his kid with him to crime scenes and ask him, well, what do you think happened, or who do you think did it, or what clues are you picking up? And at those, you have adults who are doing more serious things and making more serious threats. But in the case of Bugs Meany, he's a kid. He's like 12 or 13, and he's, causing trouble, but he's a 13-year-old. Anyway, so Bugs Meany, in this particular incident, had gotten himself involved with somebody who ostensibly teaches judo, and Encyclopedia Brown has a sidekick / apprentice person, and her name is Sally, I don't recall her last name off the top of my head. You know me, I don't do research. Anyway, so Sally is a tomboy, is the stereotypical girl who's good enough at stuff to beat up boys, which is an embarrassment to the boys, because we all know that boys should not be able, that, girls should not be able to beat up boys, and if a girl can beat up a boy, well, then that means that the boy is a weak and effeminate creature. Or so it's implied. Anyway, so Sally is Encyclopedia Brown's assistant. The thing is, she was somebody who had once beaten up Bugs Meany because he was being a jerk, and so she, did that right back. And Bugs sets up this demonstration, in effect, to prove that he has learned some fancy pants super judo neck crunching technique that will knock people out instantly. And the thing is, he specifically invited Encyclopedia Brown and Sally over because this is a play to intimidate Sally and to get back at her for, beating him up and stuff. And at the end of it, Encyclopedia says, well, no, this is just a lie. He's not knocking them out at all. And so Sally walks out onto the mat and then beats the ever-loving tar out of, or at least it's implicit that she then beats the ever-loving tar out of Bugs Meany. But at the end of it, the book then says, dun dun dun, what did Encyclopedia see? And you get to the end of the book and it says that he hadn't knocked them out because when you knock somebody out, when they're standing, they don't fall backwards, they fall forwards. This is, I will admit, the one entry in this book that I particularly objected to, simply because maybe, somebody gets bonked on the head and they get knocked out, and more often they'll fall forward, but this image is showing Bugs grabbing somebody around the neck, and the natural direction that person would fall afterwards would in fact be backwards, because Bugs would be pushing them. They wouldn't fall forwards, he'd be pushing them back. So I do object to that particular thing. I get the point. As your knees buckle, you don't flop backwards. As your knees buckle, you will fall forwards, but not if somebody is pushing you backwards as you fall. Anyways, so, these aren't perfect, but they're nonetheless interesting thoughts, and that sort of subtlety is how these work. In this one, you have, one of Encyclopedia's friends invites Leroy to the circus because his uncle is working there as a clown. And his uncle, who is the guy wearing all the pots and pans in the middle of this picture, gets accused of theft. And and you have him walking around, and Encyclopedia picks up on the fact that the woman who had something stolen from her said, I didn't hear anything, and then, it was gone. And he points out, quite rightfully, that in our paragraphs at the very end of the book, that the uncle was wearing all of those pots and pans which were making an almighty racket everywhere he went. There was no way for him to sneak up on somebody such that a person wouldn't hear anything. And then he points to the young woman in the group who had said, I saw him sneaking up on her. And says, yeah, you claim you saw him sneaking up on her when we all know he couldn't, and you are wearing super soft slippers that you could sneak up on people with, and basically wrestles a confession out of her. And that's the thing about these, is they're not unbearably subtle. These are books for children. But they're enough of a subtlety that you can miss whatever it is that is being pointed out. That you can miss, the point. And indeed, in some of them, the you know who the culprit is. There is not this one, but there is, for example, a thing later in the book where where one of Encyclopedia's friends who collects teeth gets a call from somebody disguising their voice on the phone asking them to meet somewhere to buy some grizzly teeth from him. And, and when you see Bugs Meany kicking up a huge stink and lying about the kid with the teeth stealing from him, it's an interesting moment where you say, oh, okay, we know that Bugs Meany must have been the one to, give him the call about the grizzly teeth in order to, in effect, trick the other kid into being where he needed him to be. That doesn't prove anything. That just means that those of us reading the book, know, okay, somewhere along the line, that voice was Bugs Meany or one of his friends. Now, this particular image, though, is of a dog who got shot, because Encyclopedia's father brings him to actual crime scenes. In this particular case, Encyclopedia is brought along to basically where there's a family dispute building up between a family and the man next door who hates their dog. And Encyclopedia's father was going there in his position as police chief, basically to try to diffuse the situation before it got bad. But when they get there, shots have been fired, and they find that the neighbor's dog that this man particularly hates had been shot. And Encyclopedia figures out that this man was lying about there having been a burglar that he had chased and shot at and had hit the dog by accident, that he had in fact been trying to shoot the dog. Which is a lot grimmer than some kid trying to pretend that he had the super secret death technique from Japan. It's very Bart's Hand of Death from that episode of The Simpsons. Anyways, so, and in this one, Encyclopedia figures it out because the man goes upstairs and he opens up his gun cabinet and pulls out the box where he keeps his bullets and a whole bunch of other things, and he says if he had seen the guy and had basically yanked open the cabinet and chased after him to shoot him with his gun, he would not have taken the time to carefully put all of this stuff back in the cabinet and then gone after the thief. He would have grabbed the bullets and shoved them in the gun and run after the thief, because you're trying to catch a thief. You are not going to take an extra minute and a half putting everything carefully back and closing the doors. That's not how people work. That's also not how actually catching somebody in the act works. So he's able to prove, in that case, that he was actually trying to shoot the dog. And so, like I said, they're not hugely complicated, but they're just subtle enough that you can miss it, and they're subtle enough for kids to feel a real sense of accomplishment if they figure out what the right answer is. And so, these books are also fun. Encyclopedia is an interesting kid. The characters around him are interesting characters. So, yeah, these are a good time. I recommend them for kids, and I recommend them if you're, able to take one out of a library and need to kill some time for, a half an hour with something quick and silly and fun and for kids. So yeah, fond memories of this series. And that's everything, and I will see you all next week.